As India once again makes the big headlines at the World Economic Forum, joining us on the special broadcast on Republic TV is Mr. Parameswaran Iyer, the Chief Executive Officer of NITI Aayog, straight from Davos. Let me go across straight to him. Mr. Parameswaran Iyer, good headlines coming out of Davos. India is a resilient global economy going into the World Economic Forum, and at a time when China is fading. What has been the response to India there, Mr. Iyer?
No, I think there's sort of almost universal recognition that India is the one bright spot in the global economy despite the headwinds. So India's growth story, the reforms it's undertaken over the past several years, the growth potential, its sort of macroeconomic stability, I think all are pointing in India's favor. There's a very big Indian team in Davos. And in fact, a lot of the streets have India lounges. So India is pretty much the topic of Davos.
Yeah, that was the question I wanted to ask you. India's bigger than usual presence seen this year. Was there some thinking? Why is this happening this year? Was there some thought to scaling up the Indian contingent this year, Mr. Iyer?
Well, it's, I think India has traditionally sent, teams to Davos. And I think this year, they're telling me that it's a larger than usual delegation. But, it's important to have the government of India, but more importantly, businessmen, business executives, startups, entrepreneurs, state governments. So it's a whole of India, a whole of government, a whole sort of Team India, public-private sector, which is represented here. And I think it's making a big difference.
Yeah. And this big presence, what have been the takeaways from that presence in terms of the footfall at the India Lounge that you spoke of, in terms of the increased visibility for India at the World Economic Forum, in terms of comparison with China, which has a muted presence this time?
Yeah, there's very high visibility for India. I mean, it's India everywhere, not just in terms of lounges, but topic of discussion as well. The interest in India from investors from abroad, in terms of all the steps the government has taken. There's clearly this growing interest in investing in India. We're hearing that, we're seeing that, and that's coming up in all the discussions. And I think it's important to note that this is a whole of India presence. There are young startups, there are entrepreneurs in different fields, whether it's solid waste management or digital technology. So I think the presence of sort of Team India has been well registered in Davos, and I think it will make a big difference going forward.
Yeah. How did the G20 presidency factor play out at the World Economic Forum? It's a special year for us.
No, absolutely. It's been uppermost on the discussion agenda. And everywhere we go, the big question is how can India sort of drive development through the G20 presidency? So whether it's digitalization, whether it's climate, environment, lifestyle for the environment, whether it's accelerating the SDGs, women-led development, the reform of the multilateral institutions, and the digital economy, data for development. These are key themes which have resonated in many of the sessions, in many of the bilateral meetings. And I think everyone is very excited about how India's leadership, particularly India for the world, how India can not only shape the agenda, but contribute to sort of global development in very specific areas, including digitalization.
Yeah. Was there any acknowledgement about India showing resilience? I'm sure there was. What sort of acknowledgement did you see of India showing resilience at a time when, most of the world powers are wobbling, China reporting its lowest growth rate in 40 years?
Well, no question that there's been acknowledgement in here in Davos, like it is elsewhere, that this is the one bright spot in a sort of global uncertain period with global headwinds. Acknowledgement of our growth, whether it's been acknowledged by the World Bank or the IMF, our steady growth, the reform agenda, whether we're talking of, GST, the IBC, the PLI came in for a lot of interest. But, just taking all these reforms forward, how we've had record growth in our GST collections. So both fiscal stability, but also in terms of our banking system, there's been growth in credit. And, our non-performing assets have significantly reduced compared to about 4 or 5 years ago. So I think on the economic front, a lot of optimism, but again, on the social inclusion front as well, our social net, our health, Ayushman Bharat programs, So there's acknowledgement that this is growth with inclusion, and I think that's very important.
Yes. Going into the World Economic Forum, what were the expectations from India this year, Mr. Iyer?
Well, again, it was, the G20 agenda was quite important to communicate that to a global audience, but also to have discussions on sort of getting investment into India. A lot of bilateral discussions with business leaders. There are 4 central ministers here. There's some ministers from state governments. So in that whole conversation about Team India, attracting investment and really making the point that, India is open for business.
The Prime Minister was in Mumbai and he shared the stage with Mr. Shinde, the Chief Minister of Maharashtra. Devendra Fadnavis was also there. And, one of the statements they made on stage was the kind of investments and the MOUs signed, etc. Very, very positive, saying over 1 lakh crore for Maharashtra alone. Is that the general trend you're seeing for the entire Indian contingent there?
No, absolutely. I know you mentioned the Maharashtra case, very fruitful discussions going on other fronts as well. So I think overall, it was an important message to send that, on the ease of doing business, on inviting FDI, India, is making a lot of strides. And now moving on to the G20 presidency, how the agenda can be shaped to a large extent by India and also India for the world. So I think all those themes were very central to the whole Davos week.
Well, absolutely. And congratulations, I think, to the entire Indian contingent and the Indian team there at the World Economic Forum, Mr. Parameswaran Iyer, and look forward to speaking to you once again. Thank you very much for joining us from Davos.
Thank you very much. Good night.